I want to go across to Karishma Asudani. She tracks the finance ministry for us. She's joining us from North Block. Karishma, good morning. A lot has changed in the finance minister's team. One secretary has become RBI governor. One is now the new cabinet secretary. So take our viewers through the new team that's put this union budget together and their orientations and the kind of appetite they have towards trying to bring in a significant high-impact budget.
Rahul, I think the big challenge has to be with the new Finance and Revenue Secretary, the man who's holding fort with two mega, departments. Tuhin Kanta Pandey, who was also the DPAM Secretary, the one responsible for making the impossible possible, that is disinvestment of Air India and LIC. The others being, of course, the DEA Secretary Ajay Seth, who's already been a part of past three budgets, and the supporting team, expenditure and CBDT and CBIC chairman. Now, the key focus of this budget has to be on fiscal consolidation, but at the same time also providing relief to the middle class through some kind of benefit on the new tax regime. Besides this, it is very important how they are going to pick up the words from economic survey, because yesterday the survey clearly flagged concerns with domestic growth in India, and that the economic advisors said can only be possible by deregulation at state and local levels, which is a concern because our country having a strong foot with the federal government and dealing with the opposition states is something challenging that they'll have to look into. I must also tell you, Rahul, on a lighter note, it's pretty chilly down here at North Block, and we're just hoping that the budget doesn't send chills down our spine in few hours from now.
Thanks, Karishma. We'll come back to you for more later. One of the interesting data points that came out yesterday is that central government capex, expenditure on capacity expansion, is now up 95% for the month of December. Remember, in the first half of this financial year, on account of the fact that there was an election cycle and that everybody was really focused on trying to win the next general election, government expenditure was slow, which is also why growth in the second quarter of this fiscal slowed down. Krishnamurthy Subramaniam, the fact that Centre's capex is up 95% year on year in December suggests that they're now going all out. But the question is, why is the growth so dependent on government spending, and how long can that continue? It's almost as if the government has taken the entire onus of trying to spur growth on its own shoulders, and the other engines of the economy, which should be coming to the growth party, are sitting it out. Their animal spirits at this moment seem dormant.
So, Rahul, I think, I'd like to correct that perception a little bit. And in particular, for the benefit of our viewers, earlier, there was a mention that consumption has declined. And I think, we need to get the facts right here. If you look at the consumption in the first half of the year, consumption has increased by 6.7%, when GDP has increased by 6%. For the full financial year, where GDP growth is expected to be 6.4% increase, consumption is expected to increase by 7.3%. And in fact, if you look at overall as a percentage of GDP, at 61.8%, consumption, private consumption expenditure is a 20-year high. So I think, the earlier comment that consumption has declined actually needs to be corrected based on the data, number one.
To come in and respond very quickly to that.
This is where, let me complete this point, Rahul. I think your question about the capital expenditures, I think that's a good question, because when you look at this data, I think while I wouldn't yet be fully convinced that the increase in consumption is sustainable, and I think the emphasis on that needs to be there, I would flag two key things, which is investment, and especially private investment, and second is overall manufacturing. And here I would agree with Shankaran, where he talked about the need for state governments to actually do the needful, because if you look at overall of the 6 inputs that are required for manufacturing: land, labor, capital, power, logistics, and scale or ease of doing business, 5 of these, except for capital, is essentially a state level subject. And I think, your emphasis that there are basically many of these governments are run by the same government as in the center. And I think, therefore, the emphasis on states to do reforms is something that I completely agree with Mr. Shankaran on this aspect. So the emphasis has to be on capex, and I think even with respect to government capex, while the first quarter decline actually could be explained by the election cycle, the second quarter decline and thereby the overall first half of the year having been less is something that I think needs attention for sure. But because that is what will actually really push overall investment. I think private investment also needs to start coming in. The economic survey has also flagged the need for more R&D by the private sector. Overall, private sector needs to really sort of start thinking what it is doing now.
No, but the fact is that all private industry, when decisions are taken on investment, they need to see consumption on the horizon. Only then will they go out and invest. Otherwise, they'll say the right things. When you speak to industry honchos during a budget roundtable, they'll all say the right things, but then numbers will speak more loudly.